So I'm Brian Hyatt. I'm a senior writer at Rolling Stone and host of the Rolling Stone Music Now podcast. And I'm here with some very special people to talk about the sort of power and promise and peril of AI in music, generative AI specifically. First of all, we have Leila Mignoni. She is the global head of brand marketing and communication for BACARDÍ. And we have a music legend, Boy Wonder.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Grammy-winning, Grammy-nominated, worked with everyone from Drake to Eminem to Jay-Z to Beyonce. We could sit here all day listing names, but we'll move on. And Alex Booker, who's the executive creative director at BBDO, New York.
Hello.
And before we start, we're talking specifically about a project called the Concept AI album. And that's something that these three people helped collaborate on and create, and it's a pretty unique project. And I wanted each of you to kind of talk very quickly about your backgrounds and how it led you to this project. So just walk us through your entire lives real quick.
All right.
Yeah. No, not really, but just the short version.
So at BACARDÍ, we have this program called Musically Based Music. We started in 2017, and it's all about supporting the music industry. And so we've been collaborating with Wanda for 5 years now. We're all fans from a very, very long time. So that's how we got to the concept album.
It was amazing. And yeah, like I said, I think this is the third or I can't even. We've done so much projects together, but it's amazing to collaborate with BACARDÍ every time because we have the same vision of uplifting new artists, new ideas, and forward thinking things when it comes to music. So it's always fun to collaborate with them, and they're great people, and I love it.
Yeah, and I think for us is like music is such a big part of the BACARDÍ DNA, and I'm sure everyone here has had a rum at some point and their feet have started moving and you get up and start dancing. And I think for us, it's always been about how do we make sure that we're supporting that next generation of artists and coming at it from a grassroots level and really making sure that we're elevating everyone as we get to do so. And it's just, it's super fun to work with people like Wanda.
Thank you. Likewise, man.
And Leila, real quick, maybe you can tell us just how this is part of a larger program, as you mentioned. So maybe how that program got started and how it led to this.
Yeah, so like Alex was saying, RUM is all about joy, movement, and music is really core, both to the brand DNA, where we're from, as well as the way that we connect with our consumers. So you can't just have all those beautiful ads about self-expression and the idea of movement and dance and bringing everyone together without actually doing it also. So we felt it was our responsibility to have that stage for up-and-coming and more established artists to be part of, and collaborating with with the genius of Wanda and being able to work with him to have a class of artists and really make a change. Like last year, Simon, Wanda's manager, called and said, "Oh, the Benji Flo, who's an artist from last year, Musically Based Music, song is now featured on the top Netflix show, Top Boy," which is amazing because that was a song that was created with Wanda for this program, and then next thing you know, it's on Netflix on one of the most iconic shows. So I think giving back to the community, being part of the community, you have to as a brand. This is how we exist in many ways. These are our consumers as well, and that's what we want to be known for.
Yeah, Alex, I know you have some stories about the process of getting Wanda into all this.
Yeah, so we've done quite a few of these programs now, and there's this beautiful intersection of tech meets music and how do we use that to kind of amplify voices. But this year's one was a special moment for all of us. Back on the Zoom call many, many months ago, it was we're pitching this idea to Simon and Wanda, and getting someone of your caliber is obviously awesome for us. And then it's you realize, you start, like when you introduced him today, you start rattling off names that Wonder works with, and you know, you really start thinking like, how did the next generation kind of get access to working with someone like yourself? And then we're on this call, and I think you were at an airport or something, you were jumping into a car, and then next thing you know, this like cameo pops in, and it's like, oh my God, Drake's been listening to this whole conversation, and Drake's sitting next to him in the car, and we're like, damn, all right, like this is, we know we're doing something really special here, is if we can give his kind of level of talent that is used to working with, you know, the Drakes and Beyoncés or whoever it may be, like to someone that wouldn't normally get that access, that to us is like the absolute sweet spot of like, how do we stop making this a kind of a, like a connections barrier between like talent and amazing talent, and how do we kind of, you know, close the gap there and start bringing new people into it?
Wanda, I wonder if you could, take a step, that's hard to say, man. I wonder if you could take a step back and sort of take us through the earliest days of becoming a producer, learning how to produce, how you got into it in the very beginning.
From the very beginning, I got into it around high school times. I was always into music, had an interest in music, and I remember just a friend telling me about the program that I use, FL Studio, and he was just telling me on the walk home, I think I was like 14 or something, and he's like, yeah, there's a program you can make music, and you know, I went home and I got it, and I just remember that summer, it was like close to summertime, I was just always using it, almost like became addicted to the program and just the creation of making music and figuring out how to do it. So, you know, I spent like the whole summer, I don't even think I went outside, barely that summer. I was inside just making music the entire time and trying to figure it out. So it started from there, went to me playing music for my friends at school, and you know, they were like, yo, this is pretty good, you know, and I had a friend that said, there's a competition in Toronto and you should enter it. It's like a beatmate, like a producer competition, and I entered it and ended up winning 3 years in a row. And you know, that's kind of how I got my start. And I kind of met a lot of people in the city. That's how I met Drake. I met Drake through a friend, and we were very early into our careers, and we kind of took a liking to each other, and we just kept working with each other, and you know, it is what it is now, and it's expanded and exploded into what it is. So that's kind of how I got my start with everything.
I mean, it's really interesting. You still work, I believe, with FL Studio to this day, and if for probably this is an audience that does know that, but it's formerly known as Fruity Loops, right? And
yeah.
and it's interesting. I bring it up because, like AI, it's a tool that some people look down on. People used to, I don't hear it as much anymore, but back in the day, people would be like, oh, this is one of those Fruity Loops producers that it's too easy, it democratizes it too much. So it's an interesting parallel, right?
Yeah, it's true. People used to hate on it a lot. I remember even going to the first competition, and everybody was naming what they'd use, and everybody would be like MPCs and naming all these machines, and I was like, yeah, I use Fruity Loops, and they're just like, like, you know, and I'm like, damn, like I was intimidated until like they heard my music, and they're like, oh, damn, that's coming from Fruity Loops, pretty interesting, you know, and now it's like almost like an industry standard. I see a lot of people using, you know, they call it FL now, like rebranded, but you know, but yeah, I see a lot of people using it, and it does the same thing. Like I don't discriminate from any other DAW or program anybody uses. It's just all up to the imagination if you know what you're doing, you know. So yeah, it's you know, I still use it. I even still use the older version. I'm still on version 11. I can't use the other versions, but like I like version 11. It's like I found a sweet spot on there, so you know, I stick with it.
And again, it does make sense that you would be one of the first people to do something ambitious with AI in music, because, you know, looking at interviews with you throughout the years, you've always been kind of like democratic and open-minded in your idea of how to make music. I saw that you said, in addition to Fruity Loops, that a lot of producers look down on incorporating existing loops, period, into music. And you say you never thought like that, right?
No, I never looked at it like that. I was just like, whatever works, and if you're making great music from it, and that's how you do it, I have no discrimination against that. Even like when it came to the idea of AI, like personally, I was kind of scared at the beginning because I'm like thinking like, first thing I'm thinking is just Terminator, you know, like the AI is gonna take over, and like all the producers are gonna, you know, no more producers left. It's gonna be the machine, and stuff like that. That was my first thought, but you know, once I got introduced to it through the MLM and the program we're using, I kind of learned that it's kind of a thing you got to jump ahead of, and technology, you got to get ahead of it before it gets over you. You know what I'm saying? So it's like once you get ahead of it, you learn how to use it, and you learn how to control it, and it's not so bad after all. It's just a learning process, you know. And you know, learning how to use it and learning exactly what it does, it's kind of more productive than destructive to me, because it's like I'm basically just multiplying myself and maxing out my efficiency. Whereas, like, for instance, like I was able to work with all these amazing artists sitting right here at the same time at different places on the planet. Like, you know, like everybody was all in different places, and you know, we got it done, and that's the beauty of it. I think it just has a bad rap because, you know, movies and iRobot and Terminator and all that stuff, everybody just thinks like differently of it. But you know, you just got to learn how to use it and get ahead of it, you know?
It's more like Terminator 2, where you make the robot your friend. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Terminator, yeah, make the robot your friend, you know, like just make sure the AI knows what's going on, so when they really do take over, you're on the good side of the AI.
But Leila and Alex, I know there's a story behind just how you all came up with the idea of, as you said, you already were working with Wanda, but how you came up with the idea of doing this AI project specifically and working with him specifically on that. If you want to tell that.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of trust because we were very scared as well. We almost pulled out of it at some point thinking, like, how is that going to work? But Simon, Wanda really trusted the process. This was designed first to protect IP and then second to open it, not the other way around. You know, like how they used to build cars and then they're like, okay, now we should put like an airbag and then we put a seat belt. We did the other way around. We started with the seat belts and the airbag and then we did the car. And Alex, you know, knows it better than I, so can go through exactly how it was. But we were really worried about that because IP as a brand is something that's crucial for us. We come originally from Cuba. We were nationalized. We had to burn our recipe so that it wasn't stolen from us. So there's a lot of parallel with AI using content, using music from others and not credited them, giving them back. So that was the one thing we're really worried about. And Wanda's catalog of unreleased beats that he provided, I mean, that's like life's work. You know, so you can't even have that leaked everywhere, anywhere, because then that's it. You know, it's a big deal. So we were super worried about that. We actually went analog on the process of the data. Somebody came from Simon's team with the actual beats. Somebody flew to then LA to bring them back, like just so that there would be nothing that could go out. You know, so now for us, when it comes to AI, that's the biggest challenge. It's intellectual property. I think for some others, it's kind of, it's easy to believe the fake and question the real with AI. So I think for some other industry, that's probably what they work on. For us, it's about IP, and it's very much linked to our root and our brand DNA. And I mean, you know, we work with Wanda, like we've got to be so careful to respect all of the, you know, all the work that went there.
When you were telling me earlier about intellectual property and BACARDÍ, that actually fascinated me because people don't necessarily think about the business you're in and IP, but it's actually at the core of what you do. The story about the recipe is incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. No, and that's what it is. You know, a brand is trust, a brand is provenance, it's people, it's community, it's all of that. And effectively, when it's open, that's it. So like open source is great for coding, but not for composing, you know, like, because then you're just taking from others. So that's why we were really careful. We didn't want to jump into it right away and all that, yeah.
So Alex, tell me about taking this from, you know, maybe a vague discussion into a concrete reality and finding the technology used and making all this happen.
Yeah, so first what we did was, I mean, we obviously had the idea, pitched it, and did that thing where you don't really know how it works until you start getting into it. And like Leila said, we started really carefully with all of the safety measures that go behind it. And that's when we started talking to partners. And we ended up working with this company called Toonie, who are amazing. And it was a combination of them and Audio Shake that I can get into in a bit. But the big thing with them versus why we chose them over other vendors was really the way that they trained the kind of generative AI that we used. And it's all based off stems. And all of those inputs are from Wonder's unreleased catalog. And I know Layla just mentioned that, but it was a really big thing that it had to be the unreleased catalog, because then that way there was no one else that was going to get their kind of IP taken, or like, that sample came from someone else, or who did that come from? We really wanted to be making sure that we were very buttoned up in like knowing the source material that our thing was being trained on. It gets kind of, Toonie worked with us, and they find areas that maybe need a little bit more sound that we didn't necessarily get from the catalog. So then they bolster that. So then you know exactly where the source material is coming from. And then from that, we trained that generative AI, or train is the wrong word, but I think the way Toonie described it to us best was, think of it like an MPC sampler on absolute steroids. And it's basically, you're putting in the inputs, and then those things, it gets to pick from those, and then that's how that sound is recreated. And then the other big thing that they do is they use loops instead of shots. So that, again, makes sure that we're getting a really kind of organic sound as we kind of, you know, this thing comes to life, I suppose, to use another Terminator reference. But it's making sure that like the loops are all based off Wonder's thing, and then we can really track like which sound comes from where. And later on down the track, you know, if we were to bring in other artists into the fold, because all those things are categorized, we know exactly where everything comes from. And it might be like, let's call it Wonder and Hans Zimmer. We got 25% Hans Zimmer and 75% Wonder. Then you can start splitting out royalties, and you can work out like, okay, this is who owns this part of the track, this who owns this part of the track. And again, it's all very kind of easy for us to tell exactly who owns what. And then when it came to making the tool itself, you know, with all these guys sitting down here, is like, as they started putting in their kind of their inputs into the process, so their vocals and all of those things, we could run a search as those vocals were uploaded. We could run a back-end search to make sure that none of that material was copyrighted. So again, we're like, there's so many steps in the process where we really made sure that we know exactly what's going on at what point, who owns what material. And then again, when it comes to splitting out royalties and things at the back end, you can really clearly work out like who was involved where and when.
You mentioned audio shake. The audio shake technology I'm aware of is they have a stem separation technology. Is that what you used? And if so, how?
Yeah, so the tool we made was basically, the purpose of the tool was to upscale a demo and give access to someone like Wonder, right? So what we do with that is the artists can upload their own demo. That may have music on it already, just something that they've put together, say in Ableton, or they've maybe gotten a beat pack, they've put something together themselves. What we do is put that track into the tool that we built. Audio Shake pulls that apart. Audio Shake separates their vocal track. So then what it can do is generate a new beat that sits under that track, that vocal track, that is in the style of Wonder. And then from there, we can adjust tempo, we can adjust chord progression, we can adjust, you know, different sounds. It might be, I don't like that hi-hat, or I don't like that snare, whatever it may be. You can tweak those elements, but you can change the mood, all sorts of different things you could do with it. But basically, it's using Audio Shake to pull those things apart. And then in the case of, you know, some of the beats that Wonder provided us, if they weren't separated into stems, obviously getting stems is great, because then you've got everything kind of separated and cataloged. If they weren't like that already, we could use Audio Shake in that sense as well to pull those apart. And then you have different sounding things that, again, you can categorize, tell the AI that do this with that sound, do this with that sound, and it kind of works itself out.
Wonder, when we talk about unreleased catalog, what did you dig up? What do you have? How many unreleased beats do you have, and how many did you give them, and where do you have them?
I can't even count how much unreleased. So like so much. Like I think I checked the other day. I think I've had all my beats that I've ever made, and it's something like close to like 8,000 or something like that. Yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands, man. Yeah, I was pretty bored. So yeah, it's a lot, man. I just dug through some stuff, even created some stuff from scratch as well, and got it over to them to feed to the machine, you know. And it was pretty easy, because I have like a lot of great stuff that hasn't came out or or anything. So yeah, I just gave them all the stuff that I thought was best and best fitting.
Is this stuff like, you know, at some point you had a specific artist in mind and maybe you made 10 beats but you only played them 2 and these are the remaining 8? Is it that kind of thing, or is it just you just sat there and made beats for whatever all the time, or both?
Yeah, like a lot of the time for me, it's just fun for me to make music, whether I'm in with an artist. Some of the ideas were like I was in with an artist working, and some stuff was completed, didn't come out, incomplete stuff. It was just like a body of things, and some were incomplete, some were completed, some were ideas, full ideas, some were like very short ideas. I just gave them like a plethora of things to work with, and yeah, it's just that's my job and my passion. You know, that's all I do. Is majority of the time is make music. So I had a lot to work with. As I said, like 8,000 ideas is kind of insane. You know, so I just I picked from some of my favorite stuff because I wanted to. You know, I knew I was working with a bunch of talented artists, and I wanted it to sound as amazing as it could. Yeah.
And maybe you could talk about your first reactions to, you know, what the AI was putting out, what you got, and then taking the process from there.
Yeah, I was shocked when I first heard it. I was like, "Yo, that's crazy. That sounds like that's like literally me." So it's like it's kind of cool though. Like, well, I'm like, "Yo, it's like you like I said, you multiply your output, and it's like, yeah, I would have done that because that's me." You know, so it's kind of interesting. So, but yeah, it was amazing, and then to hear like the finished product of what everybody did, and it just came together amazing, man. It came together. We got all the right things and all the right people to do it, and it's lovely.
It's kind of the beauty of it, right? Because you've got your own fingerprint of the sound, and that's the thing that we wanted to make sure, like whatever we did stayed true to, and like, you know, he's got a brand, and it's a big brand, and it's like, how do we make sure that like we don't cheapen his brand or like put out something that's inferior, something that you wouldn't be proud of? And it's like we had so many conversations around that in the kind of figuring stuff out process that was just like we can't put out something that is inferior that like he would never put his name to. So there's so many iterations of like figuring out the tool, figuring out how long each loop should be when they input it into the system. Is it a MIDI file that goes in? Is it, you know, like there's all these different things that really making sure that it doesn't sound synthetic, it doesn't sound glitchy, all of those things. And I think the final tool ended up being able to kind of spit out something like 3.6 billion different iterations of a track, which is like, to Wanda's point before about like being able to kind of, you know, work at a rate that you could never normally work at. Like, it's insane to think that there's, you know, 3.6 billion iterations of outputs that could come from the input source material. It's just wild.
That's crazy. And I mean, was the tool, forgive me if this is too technical, but did the tool get to the point where it was outputting stems, or did it output something that you then needed to split into stems using Audio Shake?
No, it can output stems.
Wow. Okay. And was it wave files or MIDI or both? Like, I just know that there's people who might be interested on that level.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure of that one.
Fair.
Waves,
that makes sense. Cool.
But we do know like we could go in and like edit different things within the stems, I suppose. If like you weren't like super into the chorus or you weren't super into a particular sound, you could kind of tweak those elements.
Yeah. And tell me about recruiting the artists for this project, because there's a bunch of really interesting singers on this.
Oh yeah. My bad. I thought you were looking at him. That's why. Yeah, it was just you know, we had a lot of dope artists to pick from. Some that I'm very familiar with too, and I had listened to everybody, and it came along perfectly. Like when I heard everybody and what everybody did to the songs as well after, I was really impressed. I was impressed with what the AI did, and impressed with what everybody did. Like everything was put together really well, and the process was just, you know, us just finding who we thought could be the best for the songs and the ideas that we had in mind, and we made the right choice on everybody. So it was great, and everything came together amazing. and they're all right here,
Nice.
sitting right here at the front.
I think it too, that's like really interesting when you, like, when you give it to creators, like, because, you know, I can jump on there and play around and probably spit something out, but it's like, I'm using it as a kind of an end point versus a starting point, which is what these guys did, which is phenomenal, right? They're adding to it and they're building upon it versus just like, you know, clicking a few buttons and cool, I made a wonder sounding beat. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but it's not super creative. Whereas like adding to it, putting ideas into it, tweaking their own ideas and working back with you, that's when the like that human element comes back into it, which I think is like why we were all so impressed with the sound, is you can really feel that it's not just leaving it up to a machine to kind of create a final output, but like how do we use it as a creative tool within the process?
Lil, I know you had some ideas about sort of how this can democratize music and how it fits in with the kind of goal of the Music Liberates Music program.
Yes, I mean, democratized to a point. We didn't want it to be open because we want to respect the, you know, one does art, beats, and we wanted to work with like super serious artists versus just have that available to anyone. So I think there's a part that Wanda went through in terms of curation, working with you guys and all of that, just so that it would be serious, you know, like not something that's like, because otherwise it can become a bit gimmicky. And I think it's quality over quantity. Like effectively, that tool could be open for 1,000 people, but no, just 5 amazing artists, and that's that, you know. And in terms of MLM, I mean, every year the program is based on a different insight, depending on the challenge of the industry. Obviously, music is the first sort of vertical that had to deal with streaming, and now they've got to deal with AI. So it's kind of like a lot, you know, for the music industry to always have those giant challenges that only end up being very difficult for artists and for talent in terms of revenue streams. So every year it's based on a new insight. We had a couple of years ago with Wanda, the program that was based around female producers. Only 2% of producers in the music industry are women. So that's sort of like the light that we want on this program. I don't know what we'll do next year. So it always evolves. To Alex's point earlier, it's always based on the insight, what's happening in the music community. How can BACARDÍ help and provide the stage? We have decent media dollars, not enough ever, but decent enough to share the stage and build in the community, and you know, not just talk, you know, like actually do something. So.
I mean, Wanda, the experience of having an AI trained on your music, then spitting music back on you in that style, I mean, it's a little like looking in a million mirrors or something. Like it's a weird reflection of, you know, the essence of what you do. I know talking to people like David Guetta, he was saying that, you know, he was talking more theoretically because he hasn't actually had this experience, but like a lot, everyone's having these conversations they're talking about. He was thinking that if he started to hear an AI spitting his own style back at him, he would just take that as a challenge to innovate to a place that the AI didn't know about yet. I wonder if you had similar thoughts after seeing that reflection.
Yeah, for sure. I felt that way because the AI, I was hearing some stuff coming back, and I was kind of like, hey, that's kind of like, yeah, I was like, that's kind of like really, that's kind of fire. Like, so I was like, it's kind of upsetting me a little bit, but I was like, I gotta compete with the AI now. Yeah, it's kind of cool just to see where it was going, and yeah, definitely like makes you think, like you gotta like stay ahead of yourself, kind of like challenging yourself in a bit. So it was cool. It was cool like to hear the ideas come back, and inspiring as well too, because just makes me want to get back in there and, you know, get back at the AI. You know, I'm just joking.
Did it make you aware of like habits that you weren't quite aware of, like sort of signature moves that you didn't quite realize were your signatures?
Yeah, like I would hear a lot of that. It was like, okay, like I would. That's definitely something that I would do. But you know, it's, like I said, it wasn't like offensive or anything. It was like, it's me, you know. It was cool, but like it's cool to just hear that, like and see that coming back. So yeah, I enjoyed it, man. I'm never the type of person that's like I said, I'm forward thinking, and I'm just all for like doing like cool, innovative, and forward thinking stuff. So I loved every moment of it, and working with everybody at BACARDÍ and it was just a great experience.
Alex, I know you had some thoughts about AI as a creative enhancement tool, and the fact that people are going to be using it in different ways. Some people might just, there's new tools that are kind of like Mid-Journey for music, where you can just type something and music comes out, and they might be satisfied with that final result. But there's other people who are going to use that and then work with it to take it to the next level. What were you thinking about all that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think creative tools in the hands of creative people will always do really great things, right? And there's always going to be the ones where someone that's not necessarily in it for the creative output, but just wants to mess around. Like, that's also totally fine. I think for me is like, if we're giving people a different access, and not necessarily with this tool, but if we're bringing people into music in a new way, that like, maybe I'm a passive listener to Spotify, right? I just listen to music, that's it. I maybe sing in the shower, I don't play an instrument, whatever, right? There's that level. Then if someone can go off and play around with something like this and start making music and start finding a new passion, that's pretty cool. But then for people that actually are pursuing music like very creatively and very passionately, like, how is this tool able to kind of help them unlock something that they couldn't have before? And I think, like, if you look back, I mean, we were talking about Fruity Loops before, or Ableton, or an MPC sampler, or whatever it may be, they've all been technological advancements that allow people to kind of get into music in a new way that they wouldn't have maybe not been able to previously. And I think, like, as much as we can use these tools to kind of enable people to be creative and do their thing, I mean, I think of the iPhone, right? Everyone's a photographer now. There's still a tier of photographers that are phenomenal. It doesn't mean just because I take shots with my iPhone that I'm any better or worse. It's just like, oh, I'm starting to see the world differently. And I think that's how we like discuss these tools, is like, how do we use them to kind of enable people to kind of get into things that maybe they weren't into before.
Lila, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, but it's exactly that. On that point, it's what we created is providing access of Wanda using AI for it versus AI. Do you see what I mean? Like, the headline was sort of like, it's Wanda and 5 amazing talent can work with Wanda without, the barriers of distance, connection, whatnot. And AI is there for that, and that's great, but it's a human story. Do you see what I mean? Versus, to your point, on like when it's just the phone and then there's not that human connection or whatnot. So hence the creative on like Wanda being cloned. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you still need taste, right? Like, that's going to be the differentiator between, like, is it good or is it just another thing? And I think there will be the gimmicks, right? We all saw the Weeknd and Drake collaboration come out, and that made a viral headline for 5 minutes, and then it kind of moved on. Yeah. And like, those things are going to continue to happen, and they will be popular for a minute. But it's like, what's the long-standing kind of legacy of a tool like this, and how it gets used, and how people continue to kind of innovate and iterate and kind of push their craft forward? That's for us where it gets like super exciting.
Yeah, I was going to ask Wanda about that whole thing. I mean, that was a big press moment for AI and music, but also maybe not as big a technological moment as people thought. I mean, that song "Heart on My Sleeve" was, we now know, was written by a human, recorded by a human, sung by a human, who then morphed voices into Drake and The Weeknd. But people got confused and thought it was, someone just typed Drake Weeknd song and it popped up. It's not like that at all. But yeah, exactly. But I mean, I wonder. I mean, yeah. Listen, I mean, for you, you've known Drake since you were like 16 or something. So you must have had a different reaction, and maybe even were privy to his reaction. What did you make of that specific thing?
Well, for artists, not only for like Drake, and I'm sure The Weeknd as well too, and I'm definitely not speaking for them, but like I'm pretty sure they have so much like musical integrity. They'll hear some stuff and be like, I would never say that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like, they're not gonna like be like fans of somebody making like an AI song, because like, you could say anything, and like, I've heard ridiculous AI songs with Drake's voice on it and other artists' voice. So it's like, that's the only bad thing about it, because it's like, it may sound good, but at the same time, an artist would be like, I wouldn't say that line like that. I wouldn't do that like that. So it would, that's the only reason why they wouldn't like it or you know, be offended by it maybe, because they keep their musical integrity. So it's dope, and some people like it, but it's just tough because once you get into that, and there is gonna be artists that are like, I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that because, you know, they wouldn't do it like that. They want to do things the way they do it. I feel like I'm not explaining myself properly, but
no, but they don't want just anyone to be able to do anything with their own voices,
yeah,
right?
Like,
I mean,
it's like, imagine somebody just taking your voice and saying the most ridiculous things. They can do that now, you know. So it's like, yeah, I get that part about it, but you know, at the same time, I heard that and I was like, this song sounds all right. Like, it's not bad. Like, there's gonna be people that are like, yo, this ain't too bad, you know. But yeah, it's just two sides of it, you know, that I think also people got to be careful of, and you know, it'll get to the point where I think everybody's gonna figure out some way to work with everything.
it is interesting that that was a pseudo viral hit, you know, pretty big deal, and the technology has been available since then. And notice that there hasn't been a huge viral hit like that. I think for a couple reasons, that it does require this, you know, the songwriting skill you actually. But if you have the songwriting skill, why wouldn't you just be a real songwriter, right? Like, why would you mess around? And A, and B, you know, it was the gimmick. People have already been impressed by that, so it's amazing how fast that kind of washed itself up. But I was curious whether you heard something that I've heard about, which is that people have tried using it for demos for artists. That they've you know, they pre-morph the voices, so like this is what it would sound like with you singing it. But what I heard is that artists don't like that.
Oh, they hate it.
Yeah,
they hate it. Imagine like, okay, like somebody's sending you something with your own voice. Like, it's basically like, I don't know. Like some artists, they take it like, oh, like, bro, you sing this, like they're just like, nah, like, you know, hard, sir. And no, they don't want to hear that, you know. So yeah, they don't like that. I've heard it a few times, and I've heard some good demos that sound good, but it's like, I get it, you know. They just don't want to hear their own voice doing something that they didn't do. Because if I think about it, like somebody sent me something with my voice on it, or I probably wouldn't like it, you know. So yeah, it makes sense.
I've also heard at least one producer recently, an artist had to leave early, so wasn't able to do the second verse, but it was already written, and so they just voice cloned it. So, but I don't know if it's going to get released. But that stuff is happening.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Then on the other side, there's some artists I seen tweet on Instagram like, yo, I give anybody like property to use my voice, and I just need like I need to own half of it.
Right, Grimes did that, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen like I forget which artist it was, but multiple artists have done that, where they're just open to it. Like, do whatever with my voice. Like, as long as if it blows up, as long as I get half of that, I'm good. You know. So there's both sides to it. Then there's the super integral artists, like, don't touch my voice, don't sample me, don't anything. So, you know, there's both sides to it.
I mean, BACARDÍ modeled sort of ideal behavior on an intellectual property and artist respecting level here. What role can a brand play in sort of helping model this behavior and showing the culture of how we should be handling this kind of thing?
I think it's there's no legislation really just yet, which is totally fine, because as long as you're doing the right thing as a brand, and that goes from, of course, music, but also one other big thing, of course, is photography as well. So for us, we still don't have the tools where you can just, you know, like put our bottle here on a background that is from photography that's taken somewhere else. So I think most of the big companies, I would assume, are quite careful with things like that. Like the same thing for skincare. Like skincare is not going to be selling you a cream where the model is actually AI generated and say, "Oh, look at the skin," you know. It's a bit super hip, you know. No, exactly. It's kind of it's fake. So I think it's just about brand doing the right thing, and I think there's enough scrutiny. Consumers are like super engaged and really careful at what's happening out there and how brands are working. So, you know, there's that sort of like self-regulation that's done. But for us, we're private companies, so we're really paranoid, really careful at always doing right. Again, because it comes from our history, and we had, you know, we suffered from our IP being, you know, at risk at some point. So yeah.
Alex, there's obviously so many startups working with this stuff. How did you specifically end up with Toonie? What were they doing that was so perfect for this?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it really came down to the way they ingested the music. Like, we looked into like deep learning models and all of those kind of things where something goes into the black box and then comes out. When you start looking at those models, it gets really iffy as to where the source material comes from and who owns what. And that was I mean, per this discussion, that's where a lot of our kind of concerns came around, is to like, okay, as this develops further and further, you're literally pulling millions of hours of music in to train something that way, and then it's like, you don't know where it came from because the samples are obscured so wildly. Whereas training something specifically off the stems of Wonder's collection, like, we can account for every single beat that's in there. We know exactly where it's from and what it's doing. And like I was saying before, like the Hans Zimmer example, you can imagine like later on, if you do progress a model like this and you do take different artists and from different genres and things like that, you will be able to break it out at the back end as to where each sample came from, where each kind of reference point is from, and then who owns what within that kind of arrangement. And I think for us, that's where people do get the chance to bring their creative touch to things. It's like thinking of those collaborations that may not have happened sound-wise, and it's like an idea that's in my head. All of a sudden, through something like this, I can kind of realize it, bring it to life, and see if it works. And it's like, oh, that 25% Hans Zimmer really kind of boosted that. I don't know why I'm on him, by the way, today, but that really boosted the intro to that song, right? But then those Wonder beats behind it were like pretty fire. And then it's like all of a sudden you've created something and you're using it with an intent to create. I think I'm drifting off the point a little with Toonie, but like Toonie really showed us from the very get-go that they really understood like the needs of keeping things really above board, and really like it was the only model where they showed us that it's like, no, we can account for absolutely everything and do everything with the utmost integrity and make sure that we're protecting, you know, the brand of Bacardi, the brand of Wonder, the brand of these guys sitting here, and really make sure that we put something out into the world that's not kind of destructive to anyone, but like also enabling people to kind of experience something new and work with a new tool.
Wonder, what other kind of conversations have you had or heard with artists, with producers, with songwriters? Because I mean, I know I've had them, and everyone has different opinions about AI. It's been the kind of the topic of the year among musicians, and you know, some people are excited, some people are scared, some people think it's all kind of like overhyped. What kind of different things are you hearing out there?
Yeah, so it's a lot of yeah, like more people are just scared of the idea. You know, it's kind of, if you think about it, it's hard for people to accept like change and like forward movement sometimes because they're so used to something. You know what I'm saying? But like I was saying before, it's always better to get ahead of things. Like things are going to change. Like the future is happening. You know, and instead of just like staying, if you stay in the past, you get left in the past. You know, so the future is happening. And it's best you know about it. But it's mixed reactions though. It's people are a lot of people are scared of it. A lot of people think, oh yeah, like, oh, it's gonna be just computer generated music, which I don't think. Like people are always gonna want music from humans and human interaction, human feeling, human experience and feeling too. But at the same time, you know, I feel like bringing AI into the fold is gonna make something cool and new. I feel like it's just gonna keep going further, and it's just gonna be something you're not even gonna be able to fathom eventually, and it's gonna be cool and sound dope. But it's just getting there, and it's just like I said, it's mixed reactions, and it's gonna be like that, you know, because like I said, the movies and everything got everybody all scared of how AI is, and you know, it's like a takeover type of thing. You know, like there's gonna be people AI making meals and food at restaurants and stuff. Like it's not gonna be like that. You know, it's always gonna, you know, you're always gonna have to have some home cooked meals that's gonna taste good, or like somebody make you some food, and you know, maybe the AI food is gonna be good or whatever. You know, I don't know
about the AI making food? I did not know about that.
I mean, a lot. I've heard a lot of people saying like they're going towards like maybe like restaurants that it's like, okay, you order a meal and it's like something just makes your food for you.
I thought we were safe selling mojitos, that AI cannot get into it.
I mean, we're about to get really bored if we just let it do everything, right? I just don't know, like what's the future if we all rely on AI to do absolutely everything. Like, what do we do? It's sit around and wait for it to produce a new song. I just think like there's so much inherent enjoyment from being a creative person that it's fulfilling to go out and do things and learn things and make things and put things out into the world and get feedback on those things. That like I struggle to see a point where we just give up the ghost entirely and just rely on the machine to do absolutely everything. It's like, yeah, that's good enough. I did pull out my phone because there was one quote from Savannah actually, which I thought, like, to your earlier question was worth mentioning, and I didn't want to butcher it. As a songwriter, a tool like this is groundbreaking, not stealing, but working directly with the creator of a sound that I wouldn't normally have access to. And I think that for us, like, perfectly summed up, like, all the conversations we had at the beginning of to, like, what's our intent, to hear, like, one of the artists that works with what we created together, like, talk about it in that way. It was just like, okay, we've done exactly what we set out to do, and you know, not giving someone that headline to kind of spit back at us. Yeah. It's really cool when you're like, okay, this was a cool idea, and like, and then the track is amazing.
Fire.
Is there any red line for you with AI in general? Is there something you wouldn't want to do with it or wouldn't want done to you?
Yeah, like obviously not like I said, if it was like something just taking my whole maybe like even like almost recreating something that's so similar and just putting it out and you know, claiming it as AI, maybe not that, but it's just, you know, working with everybody. We're in so much control of where we wanted things to go as well, and it was just helping us out. So, you know, as long as like, you know, I still have control of like the creative side of it, I'm cool with it, and I can direct where it goes. I'm cool. Like, you know, as long as like, you know, like my intellectual property and stuff like that's not stolen and just putting out there, I'm fine with like doing it and adjusting things, and you know, I just don't think it can get out of control for me, you know. So
there are generative tools that of various sorts that can sort of manifest vocals from thin air. You know, it's like basically there's a few now. I mean, would you be open to releasing a single where you produced but there wasn't a human singing? Would that be something you'd be okay with?
That'd be kind of cool. I mean, if it sounded good, like if it sounded, how could I deny that? If you know, if it was like an AI, if I made something in an AI vocal that came out of thin air, went on it, and it sounded amazing, like why not? Like everybody can hear it and it sounds good. I don't know. I don't think I'd have a problem with that. It has to sound good. It has to be at my taste level, and like I said, I'm just open. I'm forward thinking with everything, because like I said, you can do that with instruments. You can do that with vocal stuff. You can do that with chops, samples. So I don't really have a problem with that.
I mean, I can see that. I mean, on one level, right, because I've been playing with some of these tools, and the ones with the vocals, because that's new, because there's only been recently that's actually something that's been happening. And at first it was like, oh man, this is crazy. You know, there's vocals, but no human being has ever sung it. I was like, okay, but we've had drums where no human being ever touched a drumstick for like 30, 40 years. So it's like not, you know, when you look at it that way, it's not that crazy. It's just another leap in your mind. But I mean, where do you think your open-mindedness to kind of innovation, technology, all the stuff we're talking about, the approach you've had to the beginning, what kind of influenced you in that direction? Because some producers aren't as open to all these things.
For myself, I'm always forward thinking. I feel like sometimes in the music industry, when I feel like when something's hot, everybody's geared towards what's hot and they want to be on the wave of what's hot. I'm kind of like the complete opposite. Like, where something is going on, I want to do the complete opposite. I want to just be off what everybody's on, you know, and try to figure out a brand new sound, brand new anything, like something that sounds good and feels good. So I feel like that's where I get it from, because I'm just always open to expanding music. I feel like I'm a leader in music. I'm a leader in production, and I feel like, especially at this point with music right now, I feel like there needs to be new ways of finding new sounds, new rhythms, new everything, you know, to keep music going and keep it exciting, you know, especially in the genres I work in, like hip hop, R&B, everything. You know, just playing around with new sounds and being innovative. And you don't get innovation by doing the same thing constantly over and over again, or seeing something that everybody else is doing and just jumping on the same thing. So I personally like to go in the other direction when I see everybody over here, or like saying, oh, they would never this and that, this, I'll stay away from that. I'm like, yeah, I want to learn about it and see what I could do with it, you know, instead of shying away from it.
Take us back, if you don't mind, to, you know, you worked on Drake's earliest mixtapes. I mean, way before Drake was Drake, and then kept working with him. But what was it like making that earliest stuff?
Working with him super early was exciting, man, because I remember I heard 2 songs by him. My friend Dalton, who's his music director, connected both of us, and I had heard 2 songs by him, and I just knew immediately. I said, I didn't have anybody I was consistently working with. I was going around the city and just, you know, working with whoever I can. And when I heard his music, I said, this is somebody who I want to lock in with and I believe in. And it was just really exciting because I thought at the time he was leap and bounds better than anyone in his class. Like, you know, I was telling people from early, I felt like the boy crying wolf when I was saying, like, yo, this guy is the best. Like, I was telling everybody from early, like, I was like, this guy is the best. And yeah, the guy from Degrassi, okay. Like, you know, but I was like, no, he's the best. And nobody believed it till it actually happened. So it was exciting working with him, and it was fun, and I learned a lot of things from working with him with production, you know, whereas I used to put a lot on my production. There used to be a lot of sounds going on, and he kind of taught me how to, like, you know, simple it, make it more simpler, dumb it down, like, not in a bad way, but, like, you know, make it like a canvas, like, you know, and I learned where production and beats is like you have to make a canvas for the artist to paint on. You can't have too much on it because they still have to paint on it, you know? So I learned a lot working with him. And it was just exciting, man. He was really good, still really good, and yeah, he's the best, so.
You worked on a bunch of projects. I'm a huge fan of If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, which is, I think, like you were all over that one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how did that project turn out that particular way? Because that's a special one, and it's kind of like...
That was one we were really around each other a lot when we were working on If You're Reading This Too Late. He was on tour with Lil Wayne. He had a tour called the Drake versus Lil Wayne tour, and I was on the tour for maybe like 3 weeks, and he had a studio bus. So every night he'd get off stage, I would just be on the bus the entire time making music, and he would come right in and be like, oh, perfect, and we were really vibing together a lot. Whereas before, sometimes it gets kind of hard because he's all over the place, and we were like really close to each other at that time at all points. So. And yeah, he was just sitting and like me and him were just going back and forth on ideas and talking more about stuff, and it really came together seamlessly. And he was like, "Man, I want to just drop this as a surprise, like no promo, no nothing." He's like, "I'm just gonna put this out." And at first we were like, "That's kind of a crazy idea, you know? Kind of want to warn everybody," but he actually didn't, and it was actually the best thing ever because I remember when he put that out, it was like Twitter like was going insane, like a random Drake album with. Well, I think 19 songs just came out, and the internet was literally in a frenzy, and it was all, the timing was perfect. It was like right after New Year's. It was just perfect, and it was a lot of energy, a lot of hip hop, a lot of stuff that people know and love him for. So and me as well. And I think I did 9 songs on that album. So yeah, it was a great time, good times.
And then more recently, the most recent Kendrick album. Mm-hmm. You were involved with, and that album, I'm still wrapping my head around that album. I think a lot of people are. It's like a step forward and sideways, like just really unexpected.
Yeah.
What was that process like, and where was his head at with that album that you got a sense of?
Oh, when I was working with Kendrick, it was super fun because, like, kid you not, I had literally no idea like what he was trying to do or what was actually going on and what the rest of the album sounded like. We were kind of just locked in a room for like 2 months and just throwing paint at the wall. We were doing anything, like just making random music, different styles of music, tons and tons of music we have from that album when he was working around that time.
So a lot of outtakes is what you're saying, a lot of stuff we still haven't heard.
Yeah, tons, like tons. And literally, yeah, he ended up using those two songs that we did, N95 and Silent Hill. But there was tons of music. I didn't know what was going on though. I was I was just making music with him, and then eventually when I heard everything, and I was like, oh wow, like this makes sense. Like he chose like the perfect songs that match with the story of what he was going with for his album, which is kind of like it's like therapy. It's like a giant therapy session, you know, and it just worked out perfectly. But I was kind of in the dark, but it was kind of cool, you know. It's kind of just like shooting in the dark, but it was fun.
I know you worked on the last Jack Harlow album, and I was actually in the studio a little bit for that album, and I know he set up a thing where it was like a band with the producers. He liked to sort of have everyone jam and create stuff. That was I don't know exactly where he got that process from, but that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, that was cool. When we were working with Jack, we kind of set up like I'm not gonna lie to you, it was like 8 producers in the room, and everybody was like, it was kind of crazy. But you know, like I said, I'm like, okay, that's the way you like to work, cool. Like I'm always open to new ideas, and it was cool. It was almost like a band. Like one person would get something going, and the next person would put something over it, and it was just like, boom, like a finished track in 15 minutes. You know, from a bunch of ideas just stacked onto one. He'd record on it, move on to the next one, and it was kind of like a band. Like every time a song would be done, he's like, all right, let's start another one, boys. Like, you know, and then I'd start something, or I'd have like a little loop going, and then somebody would fit it to the tempo, and you know, it was like we just stacked music on top of each other, and we came up with some pretty cool ideas out of that one. That was the way he likes to work, and I was like, you know, that's why I feel like I've been able to work with artists for a very long time, because I'm pretty open to whatever. I don't have just one particular way of making music. I'm just open to making music however you feel comfortable with making music, or this person or this person. I just want a good finished product, and I think that's all that matters.
Right, and I think that philosophy is what made this AI project work.
Yep,
I mean,
exactly.
I mean,
took the words out of my mouth.
and Alex and Layla, I mean, as we wrap up, I mean, I wonder if you could talk just briefly about what you, now that this is finished, what you learned from the process, what surprised you along the way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned from the process is that it's not just here to take over. I think there's a level of taste that's needed to make it work. And like even hearing these stories from Wonder just now, like a bunch of people sitting in a room spitballing ideas, lots of concepts being thrown at things. It takes taste and curation to bring those things together, to work out like what to add to it, like what's gonna make it like really amazing, what's gonna take it to the next level. So I think for us, it's been a real eye-opener in like learning about where the starting point is, getting lots of ideas and how you can use these things to generate thought starters, and then what you can do to add to them, iterate on them, build upon them, and then create something kind of magical out the back end. For us, that's been the kind of bigger philosophical journey, but then just learning so much about AI in the last few months. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was nowhere near any kind of AI expert, still aren't, but like at the beginning, what I've learned throughout this process is incredible in the terms of like just how many like amazing people are out there kind of building things that are really revolutionizing, you know, the way we can access that next kind of hit of creativity and kind of advance, you know, the next generation of music or whatever it may be, film, TV, whatever. It's like, how do we use those tools to kind of continue to create?
Yeah, and I think to build on that, pretty much the same thing. It's possible to do whilst doing it the right way, and that's really where we spend most of our time, was how to make sure we weren't building a monster out there that then, you know, will jeopardize everybody. And then trust, in the sense of, you know, the trust with Wanda and Simon to be able to collaborate with that, because many times we thought, okay, maybe it's let's see how the parameters, and then the trust with the artists that we've been working with, who were, you know, carefully created to make sure that everything was done the right way. So human values behind AI always, yeah.
Well, thanks so much to Alex and Layla and Wanda.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for coming. And
thank you, everybody.
There's going to be a reception in about 28 seconds in the next room to listen to the album and enjoy some cocktails from Bacardi. So thanks again. We'll see you in there.